All right, welcome everyone. I think we've got all of our, Facebook Live and YouTube Live connections going now. So welcome to everyone who's in the room or not. Thanks for showing up. Good to see everyone. My name is Marcus Casey. I'm a meditation instructor here at KTC, and things have been pretty busy, so I only managed to get up here every few months. But a few months ago, or maybe more than a year ago now, we started walking through the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. And I think this is the fifth one we've done. And we've made it through, what is it? We've made it through 17 now, or 16, something like that. Yeah, I think we've made it through 16. So we'll be continuing on. This is a text that is a very good summary of basically the entire path of developing compassion, developing wisdom, and growing as a bodhisattva. Those of us who have taken the bodhisattva vow, we have vowed to work to help all beings wake up and escape suffering, and to dedicate all of our life and future lives and everything toward that goal. So we are bodhisattvas in training, as Lama Kathy likes to refer to it. And this is really a lot of the path, and it's very challenging. It really requires kind of reorienting your entire perspective. And especially right now, we are working through how to transform circumstances to the path, difficult circumstances, what we would consider good circumstances. But rather than allowing them to just bring us further suffering, to use that as a way to transform it into waking up. Lama Kathy gave a teaching on this text, I want to say maybe 15 years ago now. She devoted a whole weekend to it. And after that time, many people who were at that teaching named kind of a number of recitations that they wanted to do. In other words, at home in their own time, they wanted to maybe recite it 7 times or 100 times or 365 times or something like that, whatever goal they set for themselves. And so I did that, and I can tell you that even now, I'm not sure I have the whole thing memorized, but as we start any of the verses, there are enough grooves worn in there that it just flows. It's just so natural. It is a really good practice to do with a text like this. So I encourage you, if you have time, to do something like that. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's start with a dedication prayer, and then we will get started. If you pull out, and I don't have one, but that's okay. If you pull out one of your laminated handouts, you will see the 4-line refuge prayer, in which we dedicate ourselves to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the goal, or what we aspire to. The Dharma is the path, and the Sangha are our guides and companions on the path. So let's do it. Let's do it in Tibetan once, in English once, and then back to Tibetan for the 3rd time. Sanje chidang tsoki chonam la, Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi, Dagi jinsoki pe sunamgi, Drola penchir sangje druparsho. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Sanje chidang soki chognam la, Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi, Dagi jinsoki pe sunamgi, Drola penchir sangje druparsho. All right. So I think let's go ahead and recite through verse 17 together. So we'll go through the entire first page and then through 17, and we'll stop there and talk about verse 17. Namo Lokeshvaraya. You see that all phenomena neither come nor go, still you strive solely for the benefit of beings. Supreme Guru and Protector Chenrezig, to you I continually bow with body, speech, and mind. The perfect Buddhas, sources of benefit and happiness, arise from practicing the genuine Dharma. Since that in turn depends on knowing how to practice, the practices of a Bodhisattva shall be explained. Now that you have obtained the precious human body, the great boat so difficult to find, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of samsara, to listen, reflect, and meditate with diligence day and night is the practice of a Bodhisattva. Passion towards friends churns like water. Hatred towards enemies burns like fire. Through dark ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to reject. To abandon one's homeland is the practice of a Bodhisattva. Giving up negative places, mental afflictions gradually decrease. With no distractions, virtuous activities naturally increase. When mind becomes clear, certainty in the Dharma is born. To rely on solitude is the practice of a Bodhisattva. Old friends and relatives will separate. Possessions gained with exertion will be left behind. Consciousness, the guest, will leave the guest house of the body. To let go of this life is the practice of a Bodhisattva. When friendship with someone causes the three poisons to increase, degrades the activities of listening, reflecting, and meditating, and destroys loving kindness and compassion, to give up such a friendship is the practice of a Bodhisattva. When in reliance on someone, your defects wane and your positive qualities grow like the waxing moon, to cherish such a spiritual friend more than your own body is the practice of a Bodhisattva. Themselves captives in the prison of samsara, whom can the worldly gods protect? Therefore, to seek refuge in those who do not deceive, the three jewels, is the practice of a Bodhisattva. The suffering of the lower realms, so difficult to bear, is the fruit of wrong deeds, so the Buddha taught. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never to commit negative actions is the practice of a Bodhisattva. Like dew on a blade of grass, happiness in the three realms evaporates in a single instant. To strive for the supreme state of liberation that never changes is the practice of a Bodhisattva. From beginningless time, your mothers have cherished you. If they now suffer, what good is your own happiness? Therefore, in order to liberate limitless sentient beings, giving rise to bodhicitta is the practice of a bodhisattva. All suffering comes from yearning for your own happiness. The perfect Buddhas are born from the intention to benefit others. Therefore, to truly exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others is the practice of a bodhisattva. Even if someone driven by desire steals all your wealth or incites someone else to steal it, to dedicate to this person your body, possessions, and all your virtue of the 3 times is the practice of a bodhisattva. If someone cuts off your head, even when you have not done the slightest thing wrong, through the power of compassion, to take his misdeeds upon yourself is the practice of a bodhisattva. Should someone slander you throughout 1 billion worlds with a heart full of love to proclaim his good qualities in return is the practice of a bodhisattva. If in the middle of a crowd of people, someone reveals your hidden faults and abuses you for them, to see him as a spiritual friend and to bow with respect is the practice of a bodhisattva. If someone whom you cherish as dearly as your own child takes you for an enemy, then, like a mother whose child is sick, to love that person even more is the practice of a bodhisattva. Even when someone who is your equal or inferior, driven by spite, seeks to defame you, to place him on the crown of your head with the same respect you would accord your guru is the practice of a bodhisattva. Okay, wake up, computer. All right, so the Tibetans love to create lists, and that is a very good memorization technique. And one of the lists that we have is a list of 10 adverse circumstances. And in this, starting earlier, we've already done the first 5, but verses 12 through what we're going to cover today, there's one verse for each of these 10 adverse circumstances. And the reason is because learning to transform these adverse circumstances is such a powerful part of the path and gives us many powerful tools that we can use daily throughout our everyday lives. This is very important for our practice off the cushion, to remain mindful of our circumstances and how we are reacting to circumstances, and instead to transform those circumstances into the increase in compassion. So verse 12 was about how to transform loss into the path. Verse 13, transforming suffering into the path. 14, disgrace. 15, disparagement. And 16, about being wronged and how to transform that into the path. So now with 17, we're going to move on here. And we're going to talk about a circumstance in which you are defamed, in which someone who is your equal or inferior defames you. And I know that in our culture, in America, we at least traditionally have liked to think of ourselves as being a little less beholden to the strictures of class, right? And we don't think as much in terms of inferior, superior, and things like that. May or may not be true. And it may not be true when we're, out running our errands and buying groceries and things, but at work, I think we still have a very good bit of that, right? There's still very much management and underlings, and however we want to think about it. And so I think we can all, have some experience with the concept of equals or inferiors or superiors in that environment. And many of us probably have experience with negative workplace politics. So one example of this is when someone may kind of throw you under the bus in order to deflect blame from themselves. And or maybe someone tries to poison your boss against you because they stand to benefit from taking you down a couple pegs. These are the types of things that can really make us angry and get under our skin. But instead of getting upset or feeling like you've been badly treated, this verse tells us to see and respect such people as kind teachers who are showing you the path to liberation. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who wrote the commentary that I've used for a lot of this, he says that in a circumstance such as this, you should pray that you may be able to do them as much good as possible. He says, whatever happens, do not wish for a moment to take revenge. The capacity to patiently bear scorn and injury from those who lack your education, strength, and skill is particularly admirable. To remain humble while patiently bearing insults is a very effective way of countering your ingrained tendency to be interested in your own happiness and pleasure. And that really goes counter to our instincts, right? Our instincts are, you're harming my happiness, you're harming my pleasure. And the Bodhisattva way of looking at the world is, oh, this is really good practice to get over my attachment to my happiness and pleasure. So this is what we mean by, transforming that by retraining our reactions. The person who is doing us harm may see us as an enemy, or they may just see us as a means of getting what they want. But we should refrain from falling into the trap of seeing them as an enemy. We know that our only true enemy is our own self-clinging. We know that our only battle is against our own habits. Other people are not the cause of our unhappiness. If they were, we wouldn't have any choice. But we do have a choice. And these verses make it clear that although we may not control circumstances and other people, we can control our own minds, including how we respond to circumstances and other people. But it takes time and effort to change our mental habits. How do we get good at something? We practice. The Winter Olympics were held recently, and the World Cup's coming up. The best athletes in the world are competing. How did they become the best athletes in the world? Practice. Now, we're not practicing for a competition per se, but we have 37 practices to change our mind, and this text really is a training manual for how to practice. So getting back to our scenario, when someone insults us, debases us, or defames us, we should not react out of our pride. We should instead take a humble position. Those of you who are familiar with our mantra practices such as Chenrezig or White Tara, Green Tara, Medicine Buddha, Vajrasattva, Guru Yoga, etc., you'll be familiar with the visualization of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas or the Guru above our heads. That's often a part of the visualization in these practices. And Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche says there is a saying, carrying all beings above one's head is the torch and the banner of a bodhisattva. Treating every being as a deity or as your own teacher is how bodhisattvas practice. Everyone, even the one you're thinking of right now. There was a great teacher who reportedly would circumambulate even a stray dog on the side of the road in recognition of its Buddha nature. All sentient beings have that same nature or potential. It isn't our job as bodhisattvas or bodhisattvas in training to pamper or defend our feelings or our egos. It is our job to do all we can to help show people their luminous nature and to help them realize their potential. And the more we ourselves do that, the better able we will be to assist others. So this is how we learn to transform humiliation into kindness and into the path of a bodhisattva. All right, let's pick this up and we'll recite together just the 18th verse together. Though gripped by poverty and always scorned, though stricken by disease and tormented by evil spirits, to take upon yourself the negativity and suffering of every being and never to get discouraged is the practice of a bodhisattva. As we continue the path of transforming negative circumstances, give me a second here. We come to a verse that really just puts an exclamation point on it. This verse is about how to transform deprivation into the path of awakening. We've all experienced deprivation in some way in our lives, and if we haven't, we will. It is the nature of our human rebirth. We may experience it as poverty. Poverty may be constantly nipping at our heels as we scramble around every day trying to outrun it. Or it may come in more of an emotional sense. We may feel like we receive only scorn from those we love. And we've all experienced disease and sickness and possibly mental health struggles. We are all growing older and we will all die. And yet we can use the very bleakness of this truth as fuel for awakening. We can recognize that all other beings experience these types of deprivation as well. So instead of letting our struggles discourage us, we can instead relate to all others through our connection as suffering beings. By taking on the suffering of others and extending that out to be universal, we can transform our deprivation into awakening. I often say up here that when I choose what to teach about, it's often chosen based on what I need to hear, what I need to reinforce for myself. And I confess that I often get discouraged. We are bodhisattvas in training around here, not perfect beings. And this is a very good reminder that when you catch yourself being discouraged, when you see yourself in that moment of discouragement, you can practice taking on the suffering of others. We have a very helpful script for this. When you experience a negative circumstance or a negative emotion, identify it. That's discouragement. identify it, and then plug it into this script and really learn to connect with others. So we can say, may every bit of every sentient being's discouragement be contained in this discouragement of mine. May all sentient beings have the seed of virtue of being free from discouragement. May this discouragement of mine contain all their discouragement, and until they attain Buddhahood, may they be free from discouragement. And there are different templates, but it all amounts to the same thing. Taking your negative circumstances as a way to connect with all beings who feel that, and make the aspiration that as you overcome that all others would overcome that in the same way. Another way we can transform this deprivation is to remind ourselves of the bigger picture, that as bodhisattvas in training, we are working towards longer-term goals than just our temporary happiness in this life. Patrul Rinpoche says, "I don't like happiness. I like suffering. If I am happy, the 5 poisons increase. If I suffer, my past bad karma is exhausted. I don't value high positions. I like low ones. If I am important, my pride and jealousy increase. If I am lowly, I relax and my spiritual practice grows. The lowest place is the seat of the saints of the past." One thing I'll mention here is when I read this, I said, what are the 5 poisons? I'm familiar with the 3 poisons of ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And in this, the 5 poisons, he's talking about the 5 kleshas, or afflictive emotions. So it's ignorance, attachment, aversion, and also pride and jealousy, which he does mention later. So if I'm happy, my ignorance, attachment, aversion, pride, and jealousy increase. But if I suffer, my karma is coming to fruition and is therefore being used up. Likewise, if I'm important, my pride and jealousy increase, but being unimportant allows me to relax, and my spiritual practice can grow. This is more evidence of how reorienting your life toward growing as a bodhisattva, growing spiritually in order to benefit of all beings, totally flips your interpretation of your circumstances. In our low and difficult times, we are better equipped to transform that difficulty into growth in compassion and wisdom. There are multiple stories I've heard in our tradition of bodhisattvas who meet up with hungry animals or other beings, demons, what have you. And they have so steeped themselves in meditation on compassion that they offer their own bodies as sustenance for these beings. Milarepa said that to treat human beings like celestial beings is to offer a treasure to ourselves. If we wish only good for others and are full of love, it opens a mine of perfections, and all our aspirations will naturally be accomplished. I probably don't have to tell you all that in various parts of the world today and in various religions, there is a real rise in religious nationalism, in which religion becomes more about identity and having an in-group and an out-group. This has happened recently as well in some Buddhist groups. But being a bodhisattva isn't about winning. It isn't about being part of the winning team. It isn't about having an identity that's better than someone else. It's about developing bodhicitta and taking on the suffering of every being. All right, let's move on to verse 19. And we can all recite it together. Though famous and prominent, someone to whom others bow, though you amass the riches of the God of wealth, to see that worldly splendor has no essence, and thus to be without arrogance, is the practice of a bodhisattva. In the last verse, we heard Patrul Rinpoche say, I don't like happiness. I don't value high positions. So how should a bodhisattva then view prosperity? Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche says, a bodhisattva sees that wealth, beauty, influence, prosperity, family lineage, in fact, all the ordinary concerns of life are as fleeting as a flash of lightning, as ephemeral as a dewdrop, as hollow as a bubble, as evanescent as the skin of a snake. He is never conceited or proud, no matter what worldly achievements and privileges come to him. However much wealth you may gather, it will eventually be taken away, either by robbers, by people in power, or finally by death. If your descendants inherit it, there is no certainty that it will do them any real good. They are as likely to use it to get the better of their enemies, influence their relatives, and so on, accumulating negative actions that will propel them to the lower realms of existence. For many of us, becoming a monastic and giving up all of our possessions and meditating for years in a cave just isn't going to happen in this life. But Milarepa always taught his disciples who were householders that the best way for them to accomplish the Dharma was to be generous to those in need. Even a small act of generosity done with an altruistic mind accumulates great merit. If you have power and wealth, make it meaningful. Use it for the sake of Dharma and to benefit those in need. Think, may the needs of all beings, even the smallest insect, be fulfilled. Use your wealth and possessions in the best possible way to help others. Whenever possible, try to provide others with their everyday needs of food, clothing, shelter, and so on. At the same time, make the wish to be able to fulfill their ultimate needs by giving them the sublime gift of the Dharma. There is kind of a self-reinforcing cycle that you can get started. If you meditate on compassion day after day, you will naturally become more generous. And your generosity, if done out of pure motivations, will generate great merit that will assist your meditation. It's like a virtue snowball that you can, reinforce your practice with your actions, which then helps your practice. So in this way, we can also transform our prosperity into the path. All right, let's move on to verse 20. If you have not tamed the enemy of your own anger, combating outer opponents will only make them multiply. Therefore, with an army of loving kindness and compassion, to tame your own mind is the practice of a bodhisattva. So this verse is about how to use the objects of our anger or our hatred on the path. There is a very pithy verse that says, if you kill out of anger, your enemies will be never ending. If you kill anger, that will kill your enemies once and for all. So let's talk about enemies. Most of us have been brought up in a culture that is constantly foisting enemies on us. I grew up during the Cold War, right? I was taught the Soviet Union was our enemy. And we're still being told to have enemies. Just this week, our president told us he was possibly going to wipe out an entire civilization. We are told that immigrants are our enemies, or people from a certain religion, or gay or trans people. The poor are our enemies, or we should eat the rich. Maybe we don't like our politicians and leaders. We might think of them as enemies. Some of them have created situations that cause harm to us and to others. Maybe there are people close to us who have caused us harm, whom we think of as enemies. We have an endless supply of supposed enemies. Humankind has been combating enemies for millennia, and they just seem to be multiplying. But in truth, we have only one enemy, our own hatred, our own anger, our own ego, and the natural responses that it gives us. Hatred and anger separate us from the compassion that is our true nature and that we are trying as fledgling bodhisattvas to develop. Because of that, it is immensely powerful. When confronted with a person or a circumstance that arouses our anger, if we have developed through meditation and we are able to use awareness to separate from those emotions, examine them, and instead arouse, as the verse says, an army of loving kindness and compassion. That is immensely powerful. The stronger that emotion is, the more we are able to instead arouse compassion, the more powerful that transformation, the more powerful it transforms our minds. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche says, once you overcome the hatred within your own mind, you will discover that in the world outside there is no longer any such thing as even a single enemy. But if you keep giving free rein to your feelings of hatred and try to overcome your outer adversaries, you will find that however many of them you manage to defeat, there will always be more to take their place. Even if you could subjugate all the beings in the universe, your anger would only grow stronger. You will never be able to deal with it properly by indulging it. Hatred itself is the true enemy and cannot be allowed to exist. The way to master hatred is to meditate one-pointedly on patience and love. Once love and compassion take root in your being, there can be no outer adversaries. Remember how we said in a previous verse that the practice of a bodhisattva is to put all beings above your head in the place of a deity or in the place of a guru. Once that love and compassion take root in your being, all those beings who we are told should be our enemies, whom our natural hate and anger want to respond to like they are enemies, will really be in that place of importance above our head. We can really transform all that into how we are going to be of service to all beings. We can even learn to be grateful to those who harm us because they help us purify negative karma. They increase our determination to be free from samsara, and they help us develop love and compassion. So when, for example, our leader threatens to exterminate an entire civilization, we can recognize that this is an extreme example that we are living in the realm of suffering, and that we want to cut out what binds us to this realm, which is our ego clinging, and to aid others to do the same and be free from suffering. We fill our hearts with love and compassion for those who are living in fear, and then we fill our hearts with love and compassion for the oppressors as well. The oppressors are simply people who have followed and nurtured their anger, hatred, and other negative emotions. And we are guilty of that to some extent ourselves. So we generate compassion and love for the oppressors as well, hoping that they will also be free from suffering. This is not an easy teaching. Dilgo Khyentse says, it is a crucial point of the teachings to become conscious that attachment, aversion, and ignorance are your oldest enemies, and that once you have overcome them, there are no further enemies in this outside world. The time will come when you see very clearly and precisely how this is so. If you do not understand this point and act carelessly, your emotions can get completely out of control. In anger, you could be prepared to sacrifice your life in war, and you could go so far as to kill everyone on the face of the earth in one blinding instant without any regret. Such things can happen when anger is allowed to take over the mind and gather its full force. Examine anger itself, and you will find that it is nothing but a thought. If that angry thought disappears, it will not lead to an action done in anger, with its negative karmic results. Trample on anger with realization, and it dissolves like a cloud in the sky, and as it dissolves, the notion of enemy will vanish with it. Anger and other emotions will keep coming up in the mind of an ordinary person, yet they can all be neutralized with the right antidotes, for they are completely empty in their essence. We have created these with our thoughts in our minds, and because of that, we also can use our minds to dissipate our anger. It is important to realize that all outer torments come from harboring these poisons within our mind streams. Turn your mind inward and apply the right antidotes with pure motivation. You will be able to transform yourself in accordance with the Dharma and to act in the way of the Bodhisattvas. One story I just thought of. I was not there, but I was told that on 9/11, there was a retreat going on at our home monastery in KTD, and at KTD in New York. And during that retreat, maybe during a break of it or whatever, people saw the events that were going on that morning. And of course, we're very, very distraught. And the teacher who was teaching at the time led prayer, and led prayer also for the hijackers. And I'm told that many people got up and walked out. Again, they weren't there. I mean, they weren't to a point that they could do that. And I know this is difficult teaching, and especially during very turbulent times, it's really difficult to work to develop compassion for the oppressors. But that's, in many ways, the most powerful kind of transformation we could do. All right, we'll hurry through verse 21 and then we'll open it up for some questions. Since pleasures are like salt water, the more you partake of them, the more your craving will increase. Therefore, when something arouses attachment, to abandon it immediately is the practice of a bodhisattva. So we just saw how we can transform aversion or hatred, and now we're looking at the other side of the coin. We're looking at attachment. I remember being as a little kid and reading an adventure story about someone who was lost at sea, and as the sun beats down upon him, he begins to dehydrate, even though he's surrounded by water. But he knows not to drink the water from the ocean. Why? He knows it will just dehydrate him further and increase his thirst and hasten his demise. And that's why this verse compares our sense pleasures to salt water. They do not satisfy. They do not alleviate suffering. They just lead to more suffering and more attachment. The more you partake of them, the more your craving will increase, it says. Look at today's billionaires. How many of them seem satisfied? They have more money than they could spend in several lifetimes, and yet they do not rest and enjoy it. Many of them just keep trying to earn more and more. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche says, you may have more wealth than you actually need. You may have triumphed over many opponents. You may have close relationships with friends and relatives, but it is never enough. Even if coins of gold were to rain down on you from the sky, it would probably not be enough. When craving for all sorts of desirable things becomes so ingrained in your mind, trying to satisfy your wants is like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the more you feel thirsty. To know how to be satisfied with what you have is to possess true wealth. The saints and hermits of the past had the ability to be content with whatever they had and with however they lived. When you know how to judge what is enough for you, you will no longer be tormented by wants, desires, and needs. But, Rinpoche says, learning, reflecting, and meditating are in fact the only things of which you can never have enough. He says that not even the most learned sages, and he mentions one who had committed to heart 999 texts. He says not even the most learned sages ever felt like they had reached the ultimate extent of learning. They were aware that there was still an ocean of knowledge to acquire. Be satisfied, therefore, with whatever you have by way of ordinary things, but never with the Dharma. If your ordinary desires and dislikes are insatiable, on the other hand, and you have no wish for the Dharma, you can only sink lower and lower. So, in this way, we can transform our attachments into the path of awakening. All right, I've gone over, but let's go ahead and take some time for questions. We have microphones on either side if someone wants to come up and ask questions. I'm excited. The next verses, we're going to be switching to talking about absolute bodhicitta and some of the more difficult concepts of reality, and I'm really excited to dig into that next time. But if anyone has questions, we have microphones available. Yes. Thank you, Mike.
Hi, Marcus. Thank you. I guess my question, there's some intuitive sense to this, but I kind of want your thoughts on how do you gauge the fine distinctions that can exist in some feelings that might be perceived as negative, but aren't necessarily. For instance, the distinction between anger and indignation, which there are times when indignation is completely appropriate. And how do you gauge the appropriate reaction and keep that from spilling over into something much more negative? Sadness at being mistreated. Not allowing that to become something that you potentially weaponize against someone else, while at the same time also necessarily protecting yourself appropriately. How would you speak to that?
Yeah. It's not easy, first of all, I'll say. But we don't ever want to imply that universal compassion takes away our capacity of our rational mind to, discriminate between good and positive and negative, or to not be able to take appropriate action, right? People who do harm need to be separated from the rest of society. In other words, put in prison or whatever, right? That is a natural form of protection. Just because we say we pray for the oppressor doesn't mean that, and they can keep doing whatever they want and continue to be our leaders, right? So I first want to say that I think there's a term that's been used, idiot compassion. We don't want to fall into that, right? I think in this case, what you're doing is you're examining your own mind and looking for attachments. So as you practice, it often can be a little bit difficult that you lose the ability to fool yourself. If you're really looking at your mind and the texture of your thoughts, you learn to be very honest with yourself about what is there. So as you are looking at a circumstance, it is very positive to care about the person who is being oppressed. It is very positive to try to prevent the oppressor from being able to oppress the oppressed. But I think you catch that, you notice when your mind gets caught, gets pulled toward anger, toward attachment, toward those strong feelings that prevent you or stand in the way from you then being able to develop compassion for all of those involved. I don't know if I'm answering your question yet, but I can say there is a positive reaction to a very negative circumstance, in which you still retain the ability to look at the circumstance and skillfully try to take action. but guard yourself very, very carefully against falling into the hatred and anger that's so natural. So again, I think it's just looking at your mind and looking for that anger and hatred and being honest with yourself. Is it there? Or is this truly a positive sort of, reaction to this that will help those in need? There's a difference. It's hard. Does that help?
It does help.
Okay. I
Thank
hope
you.
so. Thank you. Yes, and this will be the last question.
Hi, Marcus.
Hi.
Thank you very much for your message today. You've done an incredible thing for me today because you tied our teachings to one of the toughest days I've ever had in my life. On 9/11, I was on duty as a firefighter on that exact day. And for us, we had about 15 guys around the table watching this. And from our perspective, when the trade centers came down and everything was quiet, I don't know if many people realize this, but there was a beeping going on as you saw the cameras go through the haze. And what most of you didn't know that we knew was you could hear hundreds. On our gear is called a pass device. It's when we stop moving, they go off. And we could hear hundreds of them, so we knew there were at least hundreds of firefighters dead. And I can remember the anger and the hatred that filled me. Today is the first time that left me from that day, and I appreciate that.
That's powerful.
You literally gave me a new perspective because let's face it, the firehouse is a testosterone-fueled environment anyways. I mean, that's the way it is. But there were grown men around. We were all crying. We were all down to a level. But that was quickly replaced with what? Hatred. Thank you. You put me on even another path that I didn't expect today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's dedicate the virtue of today. And actually, take out the non-laminated form and look on the back to the very, very last verse. Let's use the dedication from this text today. By virtue of the merit gathered here, by the power of relative and ultimate bodhicitta, may all sentient beings become like the protector Chenrezig, who dwells neither in the extreme of existence nor in that of peace. Thank you all. Thank you.